The MMA Junkie Twitter mailbag is back in your life. A lot to talk about. Let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right into it. Question number 1 comes from Mauro Santos, who asks, do people really want to see Masvidal versus Diaz again? I actually think Masvidal versus Edwards would generate more interest. We'll get to talking about Leon Edwards in a second, but to answer your question about Masvidal versus Diaz, do people really want to see it still? I think there is a large crowd of people that don't have interest in this fight compared to the first fight. With that being said, if you're an MMA fan and you understand that this rematch might not be the best fight out there, or the most exciting, or the most intriguing, judging by the first way it went down, are you telling me that you still won't tune in for Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz to fight again? I think the UFC knows what they're doing. They know, sure, it might not be as big as the first fight, but at the same time, you got the diehards are going to watch either one of these guys fight no matter what. And on top of that, you're going to get the external MMA casuals that might tune in for a pay-per-view or 2 a year. You're going to get them interested. They might not understand the sport as much that Masvidal was having his way with Diaz, and say, hey, that first fight, controversial ending, they stopped on a cut. And I mean, there is that is a storyline, that the fight wasn't stopped like it normally, it should have been in a lot of people's eyes, including my own. So who am I to say that Diaz wouldn't have had an absolutely bizarre bananas comeback? We've seen crazier comebacks in MMA. So yeah, I think the UFC knows exactly what they're doing. Question number 2 comes from MMA News Mash, who asks, if Khabib somehow could beat Gaethje, Tony, and GSP and retire, would he be in the GOAT conversations? Which spot would you give him? That's a good question, man. I honestly think Khabib, for as good as everybody knows he is, for as much respect as he gets, and him being one of the biggest stars in the sport, I still think he doesn't get the respect that he deserves. We have all these conversations about the greatest of all time, and people debate Anderson Silva, they debate Jon Jones, they debate Fedor, they debate Stipe now, they debate Demetrius Johnson, GSP. You hear the same names come up over and over again about who the greatest of all time is. However, I mean, Khabib's sitting at 28-0 right now. Sure, I get the argument. Longevity's important. Domination's one thing, but persistence is another. He needs to have more title defenses. It's a big part of this whole scheme of things. So I think once he gets those, he'll start getting the respect. And if he were to actually retire, like he's hinting at, after 2 more fights or 3 more fights, sitting at 31-0 or 30-0 in one of the UFC's best divisions of the 2010s to 2020s, you gotta throw his name in that debate. I mean, especially if he fights guys like Gaethje and GSP and Tony. Those are all excellent fighters, one of which is already in the debate about the greatest of all time. So if he gets that, people are going to want him to come back. The arguments of will he come back, will he not, will he retire, I think it will build up his mystique a little bit, and we'll see him slide into maybe a potentially top 3, top 2 greatest of all time fighter, should that happen. Twitter user @AKKUZII, who asks, who is the best matchup for Jon Jones at heavyweight? Certainly not the only person to ask that question recently. Big storyline in MMA right now. Jon Jones vacating his light heavyweight title, moving up to heavyweight, taking a little bit of time off to get prepared, but he's looking at a debut in a few months, it seems like. It'll be interesting, in terms of who's the best matchup, right? I see there's 2 routes the UFC could go. It depends on they're kind of hedging their bets. Jones to heavyweight is a big draw. Sure, it's not McGregor, it's not Rousey, but when we talk about MMA, Jon Jones is a big draw. So, do they want to take the risk of having him fight somebody not the champion and losing? Or do they want to just throw him into a title fight, get a sure thing? If he fights Stipe, if he fights Francis, those are both huge fights that will definitely get a lot of eyeballs on them. So it really depends on what the UFC's going for there. In my opinion, I would put him right into the title fight. I'm not a big fan of doing this usually, but there are a few fighters that have earned it, like Jon Jones. I think Jon Jones is the guy that can cut the line. I don't think he should cut Francis, but I think he should be the next one. I think he should be the inevitable number 1 contender. If they were to pair him up with another heavyweight, warm him up at the heavyweight division, Derek Lewis, I mean, who wouldn't want to see that? I think that the build-up for that one would be a lot of fun, and I think it's a fight that's winnable for Jones, but also, Derek could surprise him with some of his power punching, finishing abilities. So I think that would be very interesting. Potentially Alistair Overeem would be another one, but I think the UFC should pencil in Jon for the winner of Stipe versus Francis. Next question comes from Hans Walker, who asks, why is Leon Edwards being overlooked? It's a great question. Leon Edwards is being overlooked, but I think it's more of a reflection of the division than it is of Leon. Sure, I think their arguments can be made. The UFC might not see him stylistically as the sexiest fighter to throw out there into big fights, just with all the other personalities. Look who's in that division. I mean, Masvidal, you got obviously champion Kamaru Usman, you have Gilbert Burns, who's sitting in the number one contender, you got Colby, you got Woodley. So in my opinion, Edwards is kind of the odd man out when it comes to the promotion side of things. That being said, he's on an 8-fight win streak. You can't deny the guy's success, and I think he is being disrespected. Who knows why he's on the shelf, but if it's not of his own doing, I don't know what's going on, why they can't get this guy a marquee matchup while some of these other welterweights are cycling through. I mean, Masvidal has been booked twice, Usman's been booked twice, Burns has been booked twice, Woodley's been booked twice, Covington's been booked twice, and he hasn't been booked once. So I don't know why the disrespect is coming. If he wants a fight, I think Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is the one to take, just to kind of keep himself active, really cement himself further. And I think at that point, if he wins against Thompson, he's got as good of an argument for the winner of Burns versus Burns versus Usman as anyone. So that's the route I would go. But yes, no doubt about it, Leon Edwards is not getting the respect that he deserves. The last question of the week comes from Twitter user Jake Smith, who asks, even with 2 losses, wouldn't the biggest fight in the women's division still be a trilogy of Valentina and Amanda? Valentina has proven virtually unbeatable to anyone at flyweight. I think your assessment's spot on. I think it is the biggest fight that in the women's divisions that they can put on. I mean, super fights don't come about very often in women's MMA, true super fights. So I think that the UFC recognizes the star power that both of these fighters have, no doubt about it. I think they recognize the dominance. I think they recognize that there aren't a ton of contenders on either one of these women's plates. With that being said, I don't know if the UFC wants to lose even an inch of value on either fighter. Where sure they'll get a lot of eyes on a super fight. Could be definitely a pay-per-view headliner. It probably would be. At the same time, I think that they don't want to lose any steam in either one of them. They don't want the mystique about the domination that these fighters are putting on in the cage to be hindered at all. So I don't think the UFC will go that route unless this domination goes on for a while and they just are like, hey, why not? They've both proven themselves time and time again. Let's match them. But for now, I think we're going to see them both defend against other people, but we can hope that in the future they match up. All right, guys, that's it for the Twitter mailbag this week. But before I go, I just want to thank everyone. I think this week we had the strongest turnout of questions that we've ever had. Not only in numbers, but in quality. They were awesome. So please keep it up. Really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week on the MMA Junkie Twitter mailbag.